The clock was ticking. My heart raced as I glanced around the dimly lit room, the walls seemingly closing in with each passing second. I couldn't remember how I'd gotten here, only that I'd been invited by a friend to test an escape room they promised was unlike any other. The place had seemed legitimate at first, a sleek, modern building with a polished exterior, promising a high-stakes experience for thrill-seekers. But now, with the air growing colder and more oppressive, I realized this was no game. The room was small, maybe 10 by 10 feet, furnished only with a rickety wooden table in the center, a few scattered chairs, and an odd collection of strange, cryptic items. A locked door stood at the far end, and the only window was a small, barred slit that offered no help. A feeling of dread settled in my stomach, but it wasn't until I saw the large red countdown timer on the wall that my panic fully kicked in. 59:30. It felt like a joke at first. I'd done escape rooms before, quick puzzles, hidden keys, little tricks to solve. But this was different. The air felt thick, too still, too controlled. There were no signs of anything playful about this. I was being watched. I could feel it. "Guys?" I called out, my voice trembling slightly. "Is this for real?" No response. I turned around in a circle, searching for any hint of an exit, any way out. The walls felt like they were closing in, pressing tighter, suffocating me. I wasn't alone. I could hear faint noises in the other rooms beyond the one I was in, muffled footsteps, whispers. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I approached the table, leaning in to examine the objects that sat on it. A cracked mirror, a small, rusty key, a note scribbled with something that resembled a code. I reached for the note, my fingers trembling, and unfolded it. Find the key, escape the room. Time's running out. I felt an icy chill creep down my spine as I looked up. The clock had ticked down to 58:45. I had less than a minute. Panic surged in my chest, and I fumbled with the key, searching for the lock it might open. There was nothing obvious, just a dull wooden wall, plain and solid. "Focus," I whispered to myself. "There has to be something here." My mind raced, my breaths shallow as I tried to calm myself. I could almost hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. The air felt colder now, and I could see my breath in the dim light. I had to act fast. The timer wouldn't wait for me to figure it out. Suddenly, a loud click echoed through the room, and I froze. My eyes darted to the wall on my right, where a small metal door had appeared, something that hadn't been there just moments ago. I moved toward it, trying to keep my hands from shaking, and slid the key into the lock. It fit perfectly, but as I turned the key, the door didn't open. Instead, the timer blinked red. Game over. The coldness in the room deepened. It wasn't the end. It was a warning. Before I could process what was happening, the door in front of me swung open with a loud creak, and a man stepped in, dressed in black from head to toe. His face was concealed by a mask, smooth, featureless, just a void where eyes should be. A chill ran down my spine as he stepped toward me. "Are you ready to play?" he asked, his voice cold and mechanical. I backed up instinctively, feeling the walls press in again. The door behind me slammed shut with a deafening noise. I didn't know if I could get out. But I knew one thing: I had to try. The man in the mask didn't move a muscle. His voice, unnervingly calm, echoed off the walls. "The game has begun. You will play by my rules." I had no idea what rules he meant, but something in his voice told me that if I didn't comply, the consequences would be far worse than simply losing. I looked around, trying to find something, anything, that could help me. The small room I was in now felt different. The air was colder, the shadows deeper. And then I noticed something. On the rickety table, just next to the cracked mirror, lay a fresh note. I snatched it up, my pulse racing as I unfolded it. One choice. One chance. You can leave this room, if you choose the right door. But if you choose wrong, the clock starts again. The words sent a chill down my spine. But the door I just unlocked hadn't opened. Was this another trick? Another test? My eyes darted between the locked door, the man, and the growing countdown timer. The numbers were no longer ticking down. They had stopped at 58:00. Which door? I muttered to myself, almost as if saying it out loud might make the decision clearer. I turned to face the man. What happens if I refuse to play? If I refuse to choose? He tilted his head slightly, but his expression was unreadable. The game will play you. The message was clear. There was no escape without playing. No easy way out. I stepped closer to the two doors, one to my left, one to my right. Neither had any distinguishing marks. Both were just as nondescript as the walls themselves. There was a sudden loud thump, and the lights flickered above me, casting eerie shadows against the walls. My breath caught in my throat. It felt like the room was alive, watching me. The man shifted, slowly walking past me. You have less than 1 minute. Choose wisely. I felt a rush of panic surge through me. The clock had started again, this time counting down even faster. 57:50? 57:40? I reached for the handle on the door to my left, but as my fingers touched it, I froze. A sudden realization hit me. It was too simple. I had been in enough situations before to know that the obvious choice was often the wrong one. Without thinking, I pulled my hand away from the left door and turned to the right. Just as my fingers brushed the cold metal of the handle, the timer hit 57:00. The air grew heavier as the moments stretched on, like the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to make the wrong move. But I had no choice. I had to trust my gut. I yanked the door open. For a second, nothing happened. The room was dark, eerily quiet. But then, a low rumble vibrated through the floor beneath me. The man behind me remained silent, still, but I could feel the weight of his attention. I turned back to see him slowly nod. A grim smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You've made your choice," he murmured. Before I could respond, the walls around me began to shift. The door I'd opened revealed a narrow passageway, leading downward. I had no idea what lay ahead, but I couldn't stop now. With a deep breath, I stepped into the passage. The walls creaked and groaned as if protesting the intrusion. The passage was tight, too tight. But I moved forward, driven by the need to escape, to survive. The light above flickered again, casting brief, distorted shadows on the walls. The countdown ticked in the distance, faster now, like a heartbeat growing more frantic. Suddenly, I heard the door slam shut behind me. I whipped around, but there was no turning back. The passage ahead was the only way out. I wasn't sure if I could trust the rules of this game, but one thing was certain: I had to keep moving. I pressed on, the walls closing in tighter as I moved deeper into the passage. My pulse was a constant drumbeat in my ears, the fear gnawing at me with each step. The air grew colder still, and I could hear the faint sound of something else moving behind me, shuffling footsteps, maybe even breathing, though I couldn't be sure. I kept my focus forward, praying that whatever lay ahead would be the key to my escape. The passage twisted and turned, growing even narrower. The floor was uneven, and I had to move cautiously to avoid tripping. The light flickered again, briefly plunging me into darkness. My heart skipped a beat, but I fought the panic that threatened to consume me. This was no time to lose control. The timer was still ticking in the distance, its ominous rhythm like a countdown to something I couldn't quite understand. I was getting closer to something, but what? The sound of my footsteps seemed louder now, reverberating in the narrow space. I could feel my breath coming faster, but I forced myself to stay calm. Then ahead I saw it. A faint glow of light. Hope surged within me, and I pushed forward, faster now, desperate to reach the end. The passage opened up into a small room. The walls were smooth, almost sterile, and there was a single chair in the center. In front of the chair, a table with a strange device attached. It looked like a puzzle, but it was different. This wasn't something I had seen in any game before. It was more like a machine, cold, mechanical, with gears and levers that seemed to move on their own. The timer was louder now, almost deafening as I approached the table. I could see a note placed beside the device, trembling slightly in the air, as if it had been waiting for me. I reached out and grabbed it. Only one choice remains. Complete the puzzle, or face the consequences. My eyes flicked to the device. It was intricate, complicated. The kind of puzzle I wouldn't be able to solve in a normal situation, let alone with the clock running out. Behind me, the masked man's voice echoed through the room, cold and final. You've reached the end of your game. You have one chance left. The timer ticked down, 30 seconds, 20 seconds. I could feel the weight of time bearing down on me, the tension unbearable. My hands shook as I looked at the device. It was simple in some ways. There were only a few pieces that needed to be moved, but everything had to be aligned just right. I swallowed hard, heart pounding. This was it. I had no choice but to try. With my fingers trembling, I began manipulating the gears and levers, desperately trying to align them in the right sequence. The seconds bled away, one by one, until there were only 5 seconds left. The device clicked into place. The timer stopped. For a moment, everything was still. Then, without warning, the walls around me began to retract, slowly pulling away. The air felt warmer, less oppressive. The masked man stood still, his posture unreadable. "You've won," he said, his voice almost a whisper. The door behind me swung open. I took a step back, my heart still racing in my chest. The passageway was gone, replaced by the open air of a familiar, bustling street. I blinked, disoriented, as if waking from a nightmare. I had made it out. But as I stood there, breathing in the cool night air, I couldn't shake the feeling that the game wasn't truly over. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the sound of a door creaking open. A chill ran through me as I turned to face the city streets. Freedom, for now. But deep down, I knew the clock was still ticking, waiting for its next player.